Let's dive deep into specifically a more specific genre of music within Haiti, Kompa. And I actually first learned about this genre in a university class focused on, yeah, music and dance of the African diaspora, which is
Mhm.
actually a huge inspiration. I feel like I say this every episode, but it's just so important to me because it's a huge reason why I decided to launch this podcast. But anyway, when I first heard the sounds of compa, it actually reminded me of merengue from the Dominican Republic. And
That's true.
given the history, it makes a little bit more sense now. But I was more familiar with merengue since I've been exposed to it in different dance environments. But my question is, when looking at compa, how would you describe that specific style of music to someone who has never heard it before?
Well, it's let's be straight. Compa is of course a slowed down version of what they call merengue, but
Hmm.
you have to understand that it goes back in culture, also in history, because the Dominican Republic itself was invaded by Haiti in the early 1800s. Okay, and the Haitians actually helped. Soften the Spanish influence in the Dominican in the neighborhood in the neighboring Dominican Republic, but that's for another debate. So the music also went to the Dominican Republic, the music that was prevalent in Haiti at the time, and it was mixed with Spanish rhythms over there. But the merengue was very very, let's say it predates compa. In the 50s, a
Mm.
man called Nemu Jean Baptiste, because we have to go back to basically what the influences were. Like I told you, Haiti is part of the island of Hispaniola that it shares with the Dominican Republic. But,
Uh-huh.
Haiti's been an outcast also because it was the first black nation, because it was independent, and that lasted for a long, long time. I would say for over 150 years, Haiti was an outcast. So, the only way for Haitians to get information from the outside world, for example, was through papers, but later on, with the invention of radio, radios from Cuba, radios from the neighboring Dominican Republic,
Uh-huh.
radios from Texas, from Miami, were the way for the Haitian young population to get access to music. So, of course, you had a young population in the 20s, 30s, influenced by the big bands of the Cuban big bands, by some big bands from the neighboring Dominican Republic, and of course by jazz bands from the 20s, 30s, and 40s from the U.S. also. But you have to understand that at the time also, Haiti was already a poor country, and for the poorest of the population, the way for them to make money was to pretty much go for they would make money in Cuba from the sugarcane cutting season. So they would travel from a southern city in Haiti called Jacmel, and they would go to Santiago de Cuba, and of course they would bring some of their culture to Santiago de Cuba, and they would, coming back from the zafra, which is the cane cutting season, they would come back to Haiti with, the music that they heard in Cuba. But of course, some of them would stay back in Cuba, and that's why until now you have one of the biggest Creole speaking communities in the Caribbean, in Santiago de Cuba. So
Oh.
so the music also was modeled by these migrations.
Uh-huh.
Later on, it became impossible for Haitians to travel all the way to Cuba, so they would go to the neighboring Dominican Republic. So the same thing happened. So in the 50s, to make a long story short, a man called Nemours Jean Baptiste really,
Uh-huh.
he wanted to create a rhythm, that was purely Haitian. So he took the Dominican merengue from a band that
Uh-huh.
was very popular in Haiti at the time called Típico Cibaeño, and he slowed the tempo.
Hmm.
Okay, and he slowed the tempo, and because it was reminiscent of rhythms that were being played in Haiti. And in 1955 they started playing a new kind of music, and and it caught on because that was purely Haitian. He added some rhythmic instruments that are typical of Haiti to it, and hence compa was born. But it was like a
Uh-huh.
slower merengue, but it also was, let's say, the songs were typically much longer than what merengues were, but they were also,
Oh, okay.
but the themes were not, they were talking about long love lost, about competing
Right.
interest in loving relationships. But you have to understand that that compa
Mm.
music was also born when a terrible dictatorship was coming into uh, where the Duvalier dictatorship was coming of age at the time when compa music was being created, because compa music was created in
Uh-huh.
1955, and Duvalier came into power in 1957, and he's along with his son, they stayed for 30 years in power in Haiti. So that gives you an idea that, compa was mostly talking about, I would say, beautiful women, about, the subjects were very light, but there was no,
Uh-huh.
let's say, social content to compa that came much later, and it was very dangerous for musicians to even approach, social themes, or even, let's say, um, things that would lead to revolts. So that was left to
Uh-huh.
other genres. But that's not to say that compa was used for many different channels, but it was identified
Uh-huh.
at the time, and it still is, as the primary music of Haiti, because this is the one that's most known in the world up to this day, and it was also used by different artists from the Caribbean and from all over the world. It influenced, let's say, different artists from the world.
Uh-huh.